They said I would stay nothing. They said I was nothing. They were wrong. There was a time when the plate was a mirror. Cracks in the enamel. It reflected my face better than it held food. But not a break. Not yet. Cracks in the spirit. They swallowed water and secrets. My shoes knew every stone by name. Each step was a question the world refused to answer. At the holes in my pockets. They laughed. They mocked. They pointed. Each step was a petition for mercy that never came. They laughed. They mocked. They pointed. At the dust on my sleeves. At the way my hands trembled when the wind dared to be colder than my bones. Because hunger is a language, and they enjoyed the accent. They laughed. They mocked. They pointed. Because poverty is a stage, and the rich love a show. Hunger is not just the emptiness of a stomach. And I kept walking. Listen, it is the door that never opens. It is the ache in a name never called. It is the chair always taken by someone else's shadow. I starved for bread, but I starved harder for recognition. For the day someone would say the word you and not mean don't sit. Every quiet night hammered it hotter. They fed me silence, and silence became the iron in my veins. Every quiet morning cooled it into something unbreakable. I drank air and swallowed pride. I learned how to survive on refusal. I learned how to stand still while the world moved past me like a parade of golden masks. It is metallic. Do you know the taste of rejection? It stings the gums and lives behind the tongue. Short words, hard words. It stains every sentence. I learned to speak around it. Softness was a debt I could not pay. No room for softness. No room for pleading. They called me poor, like it was a prophecy. They called me poor, like it was a joke that would never stop being funny. They thought the rain would always find me and never them. They thought the cold had chosen me and signed a contract. They were wrong. The cold was a tutor. The rain was a witness. I remember hands that hid inside expensive sleeves. I remember eyes that never met mine. I remember later, which meant never. I remember maybe, which meant no. I remember how the door closed slowly, so I could feel every inch of it denying me. But hear me. The world is polite when it discards the unwanted. It smiles while it shuts you out. I folded them and pressed them under my ribs. Each one became a page in the ledger of my becoming. I kept the receipts of every insult. Each sneer was recorded. Pain has math. Each whisper tallied. I learned it early. I sharpened myself on the edge of their laughter. I wore their cruelty like a belt of thorns. I bled, yes, but I counted the drops. And I learned that blood is ink when the story is worth writing. Because surrender is a feast for those who never went hungry. Because giving up is a luxury. Why don't set you give up? I had to sleep with them drawn. I had to hold them like a blade. Because I could not afford to be gentle with my own dreams. They laughed. They mocked. They pointed. And I memorized the rhythm. Like a drum teaching me how to march. Like a metronome teaching me how to breathe between blows. They thought they were breaking me. Like a clock teaching me how to wait. Look at your scars. They were merely keeping time. Look at yourself. Do you see weakness? Or do you see proof that you survived? Hunger makes honest people of us all. It strips away the borrowed faces. And vows once made in hunger do not die. It leaves the bone, the marrow, the vow. I learned to speak without permission. I learned to want without apology. I learned that the world respects nothing so much as persistence delivered in silence. So I stored my words in my chest, like coals. I warmed my hands over them. I waited. I watched. I worked. They fed me silence, and silence became the iron in my veins. I carry that iron still. It does not rust. It remembers. It listens when laughter rises and waits for it to tire. It hums when doors unlock from the inside. They laughed. They mocked. They pointed. But I was busy counting. I was busy forging. I was busy turning ashes into tinder, and tinder into flame. I was busy learning the art of standing up so slowly, no one noticed until I was taller than their contempt. This is the vow. This is not the victory. This is the last night of winter speaking to the first breath of spring. I will not be quiet for them again. I will not be small for them again. Remember the rhythm. They laughed. They mocked. They pointed. I will not be hungry for their approval again. They will learn the cost of every beat. Because when the rhythm changes, they say betrayal is a knife. A knife wounds once. Betrayal wounds forever. But they are wrong. It was not a single cut. Not one moment of treachery, but a lifetime of silence. It was 1,000 small ones. A lifetime of eyes that looked past me, never at me. A family. The ones who should have been my shield. As a lifetime of hands that never reached back when I reached out. Instead, they were the first to vanish. The ones who should have said, "Stand, we are with you." Blood does not always mean loyalty. Sometimes blood means strangers wearing familiar faces. Sometimes blood means chains. They turned away when the air grew colder. They lowered their eyes because seeing me meant admitting their shame. They hid their hands when I asked for warmth. Friends. They feasted on my laughter when I had it. Friends who swore eternity in youth. Friends who said always, but meant until it said inconvenient. They disappeared when my table was bare. Their loyalty was conditional. Their love was a loan I could never repay. And so they left. That they were never friends. And in their leaving, they revealed the truth. They were spectators. Spectators who preferred tragedy to triumph. Society. Applications denied. A wall dressed in gold. Every door shut in my face. And every smile just a curtain hiding rejection. The gates of opportunity slammed so hard. I still hear the echo. Requests ignored. Dreams treated like trash. Thrown into the gutter. Every no became a bruise. Every dismissal a scar. Every polite refusal a coffin lid nailed shut. And I was the wood they tried to split. Every sneer was a nail. Every rejection a hammer. But what they didn't set know was that I was stone, harder than their cruelty, heavier than their pity. I was not broken. I was carved. Do you know what betrayal does? It burns the bridges you never knew you crossed. It shows you that family is not always kin, that friends are not always allies, and that society is not a home but a cage. It teaches you the art of walking alone. And the truth was this. I was alone. It strips you of illusion until only truth remains. Utterly. Completely. And yet, I stood. They closed the doors. I built my own. They erased my name. I carved it into stone. They turned their backs. I turned my pain into a compass. They had only planted me. They thought they had buried me. Each betrayal was a seed in the soil of my suffering, but I watered it with hunger. I fed it with silence. I gave it the only sunlight it needed. My rage, something unstoppable. And from that soil, something monstrous grew. Something they could no longer ignore. Understand this. Betrayal is the purest teacher. It teaches you to stop begging. It teaches you that the world does not care for fairness, And so you must create your own justice. It teaches you to stop waiting. It makes you cold. It makes you sharp. They wanted me weak. It makes you unrelenting. They wanted me desperate. They wanted me crawling to their doors forever. But every slammed door became another brick in my fortress. Every insult became mortar. Every humiliation became a foundation stone. I built myself from their rejection. I built myself from their abandonment. They closed the doors. I built my own. I built myself from their laughter. And my doors do not creak. My doors do not tremble before the wind. My doors do not shut. They defy. They stand. They tower. Now when they beg, they will find I learned well from them. Now when they knock, they will find the sound swallowed by silence. Now when they plead, they will find no seat at my table. Polite, hollow, I will smile as they once smiled, unmoved. And though they thought they were sealing me in a coffin, every sneer was a nail, every rejection a hammer. They closed the doors. I built my own. And through those doors, now walk only the unafraid, the unbroken, the unforgotten. They were building me a throne. The rest can stay outside. Pain was not my enemy. Where they belong.
Pain was my tutor.
Hunger was not my curse. Hunger was my drill master. They thought the fire would consume me. Loneliness was not my prison. Loneliness was my forge. But fire does not only destroy. Fire reshapes. Fire purifies. Each strike meant to shatter me became rhythm. A fire makes iron stronger. I was the iron in the flames, beaten, broken, and reforged. Every wound, a weapon. Each blow meant to silence me became music. Every scar was a lesson. When the stomach aches, the mind sharpens. When you learn to live on less, you learn the power of endurance. Hunger taught me discipline. Others feasted on luxury, grew fat on ease, and called it strength. But I feasted on emptiness. I starved my weakness until only will remained, because nothing terrifies the full more than the starving. But hunger made me limitless. They thought hunger made me small. They denied me, once, twice, 100 times. The starving will do what the comfortable will never dare. Rejection birthed obsession. Each no became a brand burned into my skin. Every denial whispered, work harder. And I carried those brands like medals. Every rejection snarled, prove them wrong. I slept less. I worked more. I devoured every hour they wasted. I sharpened myself on every insult they threw. They wanted me gone, but rejection only made me inevitable. Silence wrapped around me like a shroud, and I let it. Loneliness became a forge. No distractions, just me, my rage, my hunger, and the sound of my own breathing. No false companions. Alone I became whole. In that silence, I found focus. In that solitude, I built strength. And I swore I would never crawl again. Because those who cannot walk alone will always crawl behind another. Every scar was a lesson, and that fire welded me together tighter than before. Every wound, a weapon. They saw cracks in me, but the cracks let the fire in. I became harder, sharper, not despite the pain, because of it. Blood, sweat, sacrifice, these were not burdens. Every drop of blood drew the map of my empire. They were blueprints. Every bead of sweat poured the foundation of my throne. Every sacrifice became the stone I stood upon. What they thought was loss was merely exchange. I traded comfort for resilience. I traded ease for power. I traded companionship for clarity. because it is being prepared for purpose. Do you know why iron bends in the flames? And I do not regret it. Bent until I discovered I was unbreakable. And I was bent. Again and again. Bent until I no longer feared breaking. Look at me. Every scar was a lesson. Every wound, a weapon. Look at the marks on my hands. Look at the fire in my eyes. These are not ornaments. They are proof. Proof that I survived what should have destroyed me. These are not symbols of pity. They believed I would collapse under the weight of my own suffering. Proof that I endured what they thought I could not. Proof that I am no longer man alone. I am weapon sharpened and remade. But suffering was not a chain. The suffering was a chisel. It carved me into something they no longer recognize. And now I gleam with a fire of my own. I was iron in the flames, beaten, broken, and reforged. Every scar was a lesson. Every wound, a weapon. I do not hide them. I brandish them. This is the truth of my becoming. I do not weep for them. I wield them. Pain was not my end. Pain was my beginning. And from the crucible of fire, I rise. Not the silence of defeat. I learned the art of silence. Not the silence of surrender, but the silence of a predator in the dark. The silence of a storm before it breaks the sky. They thought I disappeared. They thought my absence meant failure. They thought I was finished. But absence is not weakness. Absence is preparation. I withdrew not to fade, but to sharpen. I retreated, not to surrender, but to return. To step by step, stone by stone, I built what they could not see. I waited, I worked, I watched. The nights devoured my blood, my sweat, my hours. While they slept, I plotted. While they feasted, I fasted on discipline, and that was my advantage. They saw nothing. While they laughed, I carved scars into strength. No one heard the battles I fought in the dark. No one heard the bones crack under the weight I carried. No one heard the breath I dragged through the fire. And I remembered. But I heard. I remembered every echo in that hollow night. And those echoes became the rhythm of my rise. Time was my ally. Patience was my weapon. They mocked my slowness, but they did not understand. Thrones are not stumbled upon. Empires are not rushed. Crowns are not found. They are forged. And I forged mine in silence. I waited. I worked. I watched. There, without distraction, without false hands to pull me back, I built myself. I embraced solitude. Loneliness was no curse. It was a workshop. I studied the patterns of a world that thought it had defeated me. I studied their moves. I studied their flaws. And while they thought I was forgotten, I was memorizing the blueprint of power. They did not see the nights I bled into my work. They did not see the mornings where I rose without sleep. They did not see the sacrifices I buried in the soil of my becoming. They did not see the empire I built in pieces, hidden from their eyes. But I saw. I was the shadow. No one noticed, until the shadow grew taller than the light. I knew, and I smiled in silence. They believed power was noise. I was the whisper they dismissed until the whisper drowned their shouts. I was the silence they ignored, until the silence became thunder. They believed greatness was measured by how many clapped. They believed victory was spectacle. But they were wrong. Power is patient. Victory is quiet, until it does not need to be. Greatness is measured in scars hidden beneath armor, in nights no one applauded, in work done while the world turned its back. I waited, I worked, I watched, and then I rose, not with fanfare, but with inevitability, not with applause. They looked up one day, and I was already towering above them. They gasped, because they never saw the climb. But I climbed every rung. They blinked, and the one they mocked was now the one they feared. I carried every stone. I bore every scar. They saw only the crown. They never saw the crucifix that built it. Silence was my shield. Silence was my sanctuary. And now silence is my weapon. I waited. I worked. I watched. Silence was my forge. And now they wait. They work. They watch. They wait for my mercy. They work to undo their regret. They watch as the shadow they ignored becomes the empire they cannot escape. I was the shadow. No one noticed, until the shadow grew taller than the light. And now the light bends at my feet. And now, look at me. Not the shadow they ignored. Look at what I have become. Not the beggar they ridiculed. Not the broken thing they believed would never rise. I stand before them, and their silence is louder than their laughter ever was. The same mouths that mocked now stammer. The same hands that pushed me down now tremble when I raise mine. The same eyes that rolled now tremble. They laughed at my poverty. They cry at my power. Do you see them now? Do you see how their faces twist? Once full of scorn, now full of fear. Once full of arrogance, now drenched in regret. It is beautiful. Their laughter has rotted in their throats, and their tears spill where their pride once stood. It is the reflection they never wanted to see. It is justice, because when I look at them, I do not see enemies. Mirrors of what I once was, weak, blind, ignorant. I see mirrors, but unlike me, they stayed weak. They stayed ignorant. They stayed blind. I crawled through the dirt they threw at me. Now they choke on the smoke of the fire they tried to kill, and I turned it into fuel. I swallowed the venom. They spat at me. They laughed at my poverty. They cry at my power. My power is not coins in a pocket. Understand this. It is not the silk on my back or the stone beneath my feet. Wealth is paper, and paper burns. What I have cannot be burned. What I hold cannot be stolen. It is not gold they fear. It is the weight of my presence. It is not riches they envy. It is the reach of my name. It is not luxury they resent. It is the authority I command. My power is influence. My power is respect carved from fear. My power is the silence in a room when I enter. That is not bought. My power is the way their heads lower without me asking. That is taken. Do you think I forgave them? And I took it. They were never my equals. They were leeches. Forgiveness is a gift for equals. Now I do not forgive. They were spectators. They were vultures circling what they thought was a corpse. I do not owe them the mercy they denied me. I do not forget. The same hands that pushed me down now tremble when I raise mine. The same voices that jeered now break into pleas, and I will not enter. The same doors that locked me out now swing wide open, too late, too desperate, because I built my own halls. I forged my own crown. I carved my own throne. They laughed at my poverty. They cry at my power. I am not begging for entry anymore. I am deciding who is left outside. But I know the truth. When I was poor, they saw me as dirt. Now that I am powerful, they kneel as if I were divine. They do not kneel out of love. They kneel out of fear, and I welcome it. Fear does not betray. Fear is more loyal than love. Fear does not waver. Fear remembers. Look closely. Look at their tears. A confession that they underestimated me. Every drop is a confession. a confession that they cannot undo what they did. They laughed at my poverty. They cry at my power. A confession that my rise is their punishment, and I make them confess every day. And I smile, because this is not revenge. Revenge is too small for what I carry now. This is the mirror I hold up to their faces. This is reckoning. This is the proof that I was never worthless, only underestimated. The same hands that pushed me down now tremble when I raise mine. That I was never broken, only waiting. That I was never weak, only sharpening. For the one who starved, for the one who bled. And I raise it, not for them, but for myself. And they will cry forever, for the one who walked alone in silence, and built an empire out of scars. They laughed at my poverty. They cry at my power. At last I no longer hide what I am. I no longer mask my hunger. I no longer soften the edge of my voice to comfort fragile ears. The world tried to bury me in humility. The world tried to shame me into silence. But humility is the language of the powerless. I have embraced the villain they whispered about. I have embraced what they feared I would become. And I have no use for it anymore. The one they warned each other of in hushed tones, as if fear could cage me. I am that warning made flesh. I am that shadow they prayed would never rise. Let them beg. Let them crawl. Let them choke on regret. I am that storm they hoped would pass them by. My throne was not gifted. It was not inherited. It was built, stone by stone, scar by scar. It was built from the bones of betrayal. It was carved from the marrow of my suffering. It was erected from the silence they forced upon me. Every lie became mortar. Let them beg. Let them crawl. Let them choke on regret. And I sit upon it, not as a king by birthright, but as a god by conquest. Every wound became steel. It was forged in fire. My crown was not made of gold. The fire of hunger. The fire of nights where no one believed, but I refused to stop breathing. The fire of rage. It blazes upon my head, not as ornament, but as warning. Every jewel in it is a scar. Every gleam in it is a reminder. A crown not of beauty, but of wrath. And my empire, it rose in shadow. My empire did not rise in daylight. While they slept, I plotted. While they mocked, I conquered. While they laughed, I built. And now the shadow is too vast to escape. It stretches over them, suffocating their pride, devouring their laughter. The empire of shadows does not fall, because shadows are eternal, and I am the proof. As long as there is light, there will be shadow. I was the silence they ignored. I am the empire they now serve. They once thought me human, small, breakable. But betrayal stripped me of that illusion. Suffering purified me of weakness. Rage raised me higher than mercy ever could. I am no longer the outcast in the dirt. I am the ghost they buried and the empire that rose in its place. I am fear itself, given a voice. I am the crown in the storm. I am strength itself, given form. Let them beg. Let them crawl. Let them choke on regret. When they kneel before me, I do not hear apologies. I hear music. I see justice. When they lower their eyes, I do not see humility. When they tremble, I do not see weakness. I see tribute. Their tears are my inheritance. Their downfall is my coronation. Their shame is my victory. I do not hide in the shadows anymore. I rule them. I do not shy away from the villain they called me. I wear the name as armor, as scripture, as crown. Because villains write their own destiny, while heroes beg for permission. And I will not beg. I will not kneel. I will not forgive. I was the silence they ignored. I am the empire they now serve. Let them hate me. It changes nothing. Let them pray for my downfall. Let them curse my name. Hate is powerless against the one who feeds on it. Prayers are useless against the God they created. Curses are hollow against the one who became them. Because I am not their hope, let them beg. Let them crawl. Let them choke on regret. I am their punishment, and when history speaks, it will not whisper their names. I am their reckoning. I am not their savior. It will thunder mine. I was the silence they ignored. I am the empire they now serve, and I will reign. In shadow, in fire, in eternity. At last, the storm settles. The thunder quiets. The fire lowers into embers. And what remains is not rage, not vengeance, not hunger. What remains is legacy. Revenge was never the destination. It was the doorway. But fire, left to burn, must become something greater. It was the spark that lit the fire, and I became more than the flame. From nothing to everything. I became the monument left standing after the ashes cleared. They thought betrayal would bury me. They thought pain would define me. They thought my scars were symbols of weakness. But scars are not chains. Scars are monuments. They are proof that I was struck, yet I endured.